Hello, and thank you for joining us for this informational session about the Campaign for SYA, featuring a conversation with our campaign co-chairs, Jamie Broderick, class of SYA France 1971, and Alex Alger, class of SYA France 1979, and parent of Davison, who attended SYA China in 2012, along with President of School Year Abroad, Tom Hassan. I'm Erin Erickson, SYA's Director of Advancement, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today. I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to learn more about the Campaign for SYA, how it came to be, what the goals are, and our progress to date. But before launching into a bit of background about the Campaign for SYA, I want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and it may be distributed to others who were not able to attend. Also, we have allocated some time at the end to cover a few questions, so please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And now I want to start with a quick history lesson that will help explain the origins of this campaign, and I'll do my best to be brief. So I'm going to do a screen share here of a timeline that just gives you a little bit of history about fundraising at SYA. So as we were all reminded on Founders Day earlier this month, that was on September 9th, the first students went abroad in 1964 through the Schoolboys Abroad program at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. And then 6 years later, 13 young women departed with the newly co-educational School Year Abroad in the fall of 1970. What you may not know is that it was only a few years later, in 1975, that School Year Abroad became a fully independent, nonprofit 501c3. So we were no longer nested under our founding schools financially and began managing our own operations, including our financial operations. However, as you'll see from this timeline, it wasn't until 1999, which was nearly 20 years later, that the need for an organized fundraising effort at SYA was identified. While SYA did have an annual fund, there was not a comprehensive fundraising strategy to set or meet that goal each year, and there had been no effort to grow an endowment. And so, in 2001, you'll see the first director of annual giving was hired, an annual giving chair, which was a volunteer position. That person was appointed, and the first endowment campaign was launched to honor longtime SYA Spain faculty member Angel Bilalta, and that had a goal of $500,000. And then in 2003 and 2010, we launched the Campaign for Rennes and the Campaign for Spain, respectively, to raise funds to purchase our spaces in Rennes and Zaragoza. Both were for specific capital purposes, though the Campaign for Spain did also have an endowment initiative. So while that was happening, the base of community participation through the annual fund, which funds approximately 10% of our operations each year, that began to increase. And that's because of that concentrated effort from having someone hired and really having a strategy to reach those funds. The annual fund raised $1 million for the first time in June of 2014, and that following year we celebrated our 50th anniversary. So all of this is to underscore the short and yet robust history of fundraising at SYA and why we believed our community was ready for a campaign of this size. And then at the March 2017 Board of Trustees meeting in Rennes, that was during France's 50th, and Alex and Jamie were both there. And under the new leadership at that time of SYA President Tom Hassan, a new strategic plan was adopted. And that included 5 essential initiatives. You may remember it looked like this. Those initiatives included curriculum and faculty development and financial sustainability. It quickly became clear that additional financial resources were needed to support these initiatives, and thus the Campaign for SYA was born. So the quiet phase, for those of you who aren't familiar with capital campaigns in a school setting, that's the time spent in early fundraising and goal testing with people close to the organization, so current trustees, former trustees, other volunteers. During that time, we got some help identifying a goal of $18 million. And we wanted to launch the campaign with over 50% of that goal raised, and we were able to do so when we publicly launched at the United Nations in May of 2019. Switch slides here. So the initiatives of the Campaign for SYA are the SYA Annual Fund, Student Aid, Faculty Support, and Curricular Innovation. What makes this campaign comprehensive is that it includes our annual fund, which we call the SYA Fund, as one of its initiatives. This is to ensure that annual operations are sustained throughout the life of the campaign and then also beyond. Additionally, this campaign is different than many because there is no building or facility component, so it is primarily an endowment building campaign. And as Jamie will talk about later, that helps to ensure our long-term financial sustainability while also addressing current needs. So with tremendous thanks to those who have given to the campaign thus far, including the Alvarez family, who made the largest gift in SYA's history of $2 million for student aid, we've reached the $12 million mark, continuing to make progress toward the campaign goal of $18 million. And as you will learn today and during the info sessions each of the next 3 weeks, the funds raised through the campaign are already hard at work, supporting current operations through the SYA Fund, making financial aid available to students in need, providing professional development to faculty, and implementing innovative changes to SYA's curriculum. Stop my screen share. So from the campaign launch in May through the remainder of 2019 and then early into 2020, Tom Hassan and I had a nice little road trip around the country, spreading the word and encouraging people to consider stretch gifts to fund the campaign initiatives. While the pandemic cut our travel short, the importance of this campaign in strengthening the SYA experience and strengthening the financial model has never been more apparent. And specifically with regard to student aid, as we recognize the economic impact on our families and our belief that the SYA experience is most enriching when the student body is diverse. In addition, it highlighted our need to support our incredible faculty who showcased their deep commitment to SYA students as they navigated getting students back to the US in the spring and made an incredibly quick transition to online learning. Can't reiterate enough how much we appreciate them and all that they did to make that possible. So that all brings us to today. We realize that moving into this virtual space opens up the possibility to reach more of our community with the message of the campaign and why it is important. We are now in our final year of fundraising for the campaign, meaning this is the last year we will be soliciting gifts and pledges to support the campaign initiatives. However, I want to be clear that while this is the last year of actively raising funds, there are still 5 years following to complete pledge payments. So what that means is if I want to make a $10,000 pledge over 5 years starting June 30th of 2021, which happens to be the last day of fundraising for the campaign, I can make pledge payments out until June 30th of 2026. So with all of that now cleared up, I want to introduce our co-chairs of the campaign for SYA, Jamie Broderick and Alex Alger. And we'll start with Alex. A native New Yorker, Alex graduated from the Spence School, Yale, and Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. She's written for a variety of publications, including the Greenville, South Carolina News, Venture Capital Journal, and Forbes magazine. She serves on the boards of the Harlem Educational Activities Fund, a New York organization that provides after-school college preparation, and Fred Alger Management, a family-owned investment firm. She lives in Brooklyn with her husband, Dan Chung, who's wicked cool, I've met him, and they have 2 grown children. And James B. Broderick recently retired as head of UBS Wealth Management in the United Kingdom and Jersey, a business unit of UBS AG, the world's largest wealth manager. He now leads a work stream in UK government-sponsored task force to create a culture of social impact investing in the UK, identifying ways to deliver private capital to address urgent social issues. Jamie joined UBS in 2013 after 19 years at JP Morgan Asset Management, latterly as chief executive of its European operations. He joined JP Morgan in New York in 1993, moved to London in 1996, and has lived and worked there since. He started his career in financial services at Wellington Management Company, an independent asset management partnership in Boston. He studied Arabic, linguistics, and Near Eastern languages and civilizations at Harvard College, graduating in 1976, and continued those studies in a PhD program at the University of Chicago. So with tremendous thanks to Alex and Jamie for all they have personally invested to move this campaign forward, I now pass the Zoom spotlight over to them and SYA President Tom Hassan.
Thank you very much, Erin. And let me echo Erin's thanks to those who are on this webinar for your support over time. Thank you, thank you. And my former trustee colleagues, Alex and Jamie, it's great to see you and thank you for being here today. And Erin, I just want to thank you and your team. I know this whole new world has made us pivot pretty quickly. Not only you mentioned the faculty with the students, but our own operation SYA and in the space of internet. So thanks so much. What I'd love to do today is just kind of work with my colleagues here and kind of ask them a few questions, and then I know you'll have some questions of your own to ask us. And when I go out and visit with alumni, I have usually two questions I ask, and I'm going to now turn those questions to my friends here. One is, how did you find out about SYA? I'm always curious how kids make their way to this great experience. And the other question I have is, what's that moment that you take with you through life of your time at SYA? So let me begin with Alex and just ask you, how did you find out about SYA when you're in New York?
Hi, Tom. My mom gets the credit for this. She heard about it from a friend whose sons had gone on SYA. This would have been really, let's see, 1970, probably 1977 or so. I was in ninth grade at the time. My mom instantly said, you have got to do this. Actually, she said this to both me and my twin sister, Hillary. As I said, we were in ninth grade in small private schools in New York City. I mean, just, feeling like, is this all there is? And we instantly were on board. And Mom went about talking to the schools, making sure that they would let us go. And Hillary and I spent the next few years just kind of waiting until we could go in SYA. Just kind of hanging out and waiting. And I'm sure at the time we were nervous about getting in, but luckily we did get in and were able to go.
That is great. And your mom's still a great cheerleader, and she's still finding us kids. So.
She is, yes. And my young sister Nicole ended up going in SYA. My mom actually, funnily enough, in those days, and for you guys who don't know me, I was France 79. There was a parents trip for parents of France 79ers, and my mom went on this trip, and she had a fantastic time. I think they went to the south of France, they drank, they ate. So anyway, she was, from then on, she was a Francophile, and this, led to both my parents becoming Francophiles and eventually owning a house in the Dordogne region. And
wow,
it was great. It was kind of good for our entire family, actually.
Yeah. And Jamie, how about you?
Hi, Tom. Nice to see you. First of all, I have to apologize for how dark it is over here, but I'm talking to you from London, where I've lived for the last 25 years, and it's 8 p.m. here. So that's why it looks a little bit dim over in my little quadrant of Hollywood squares. SYA was never very far away because I went to Phillips Exeter Academy, which is one of the founding schools. And at the time, in 1969, it still had quite a lot of sponsorship for school year abroad. So it was still before that, the Declaration of Independence. So we were still highly sponsored by Exeter. And in fact, that year, we sent 12 kids to Rennes alone. Wow. So it was quite a big, Exeter's support was quite big. So it wasn't, it was present. Those of us who took language got briefed on school year abroad. It sounded fantastic, but the clincher was when my roommate came back to the room one day with an application for SYA Spain. And I just said, no, you're not having all the fun. I'm doing this too. And so I filled out the application and made my way to France for the 1970-71 year.
Great. And Jamie, what is that SYA moment that you take with you through life from your year in Rennes?
Actually, Tom, it wasn't a moment. It was an ongoing sense of wonderment at what I was seeing. The thing that was most impressive to me was the fact that every moment of the experience was different, interesting, stimulating, challenging, whether it's having dinner with your French family, walking down the street, buying shoes, buying clothing. Everything was so wonderfully exotic and interesting and different and thought-provoking. And I think one of the things that strikes me the most is that I felt like I had to somehow absorb all this wondrousness, all this exotic stimulation by myself. It was one of those very autonomous and independent pieces of the SYA experience. So it wasn't a moment at all. There were moments, of course, that's for sure. But I think the thing that I take with me the most is the sense of, this is so interesting all day long. and just the opportunity to wonder at what really, at the time, what was really a very different world.
Yeah. And Alex, you were in Rennes a few years later. What do you remember most?
I mean, I have to just agree with Jamie about the wondrousness, because I mean, I'd never been abroad. I'd really been very few places at all. And so everything was just completely new. And it was for this continual kind of series of revelations, really. But I think what the memories that really stick with me today are memories of being with my French family. I mean, that's what makes SYA so special, almost unique, is to be with a family, to be French. I mean, this is your chance to actually be French. I mean, and that's where, honestly, where I spoke the most French, where I really learned how to speak French, how to communicate, and where I was really fully immersed in French life. Not to say they didn't make me feel like an American, because they did all the time. But that too was sort of exciting, because I realized I have a national identity. I never really thought about it before, because, well, why would I, you know? They were wonderful to me. Which, I mean, it just like, wowza.
Whoops, a little
I
bit
mean, just something elemental as French bread. I mean, and this is, of course, a simple thing. French, I had a knit, which was super fun. I made myself a super ugly sweater. My French sister treated me in a very authentic big sister way. She ignored me completely, which I wasn't that offended by this, because I did the same to my own younger sister back in the US. So I was like, yeah, okay, this is how it is. So that was just it's very special. I stayed in touch with them for really, I've stayed in touch with them ever since, honestly. And I was then for the 50th anniversary of SYA France, happens to be the only one of the family left in Rennes. And it was because he was already out of house. He was something like 24 years, already ensconced in a career at the time, a girlfriend. I thought of him as being just incredibly sophisticated and worldly. And now here we are, 40 years later, we're just two kind of older people who could talk about our lives and our kids. It was really fantastic.
Yeah, no, the host family, as you mentioned, is really, I would say, the secret sauce of SYA. It's very special. And just a quick, you mentioned the Rennes 50th. My SYA moment was watching one of the host moms, who was then about in her 90s, and she had hosted, I think, 17 different SYAers. And there were maybe 14 of those there for the reunion and around her. And I just thought, wow, it made me cry.
I remember her. I remember her. Yeah. Extraordinary.
Yeah,
really extraordinary.
Yeah. Hey, switching gears, I know that you both have been very, very supportive of SYA through talent, treasure, and time. And so you've gotten involved in the SYA world to help us. What brought you to do that? And maybe, Jamie, start with you. How did you kind of get involved on the volunteer end of things for SYA?
Well, I mean, first of all, Tom, I'm like a lot of other alums. It was such a central piece of my life and my formation that SYA has never really been very far from my mind. I mean, after SYA, I went to, when I went into college, I then went to Germany and did a year in Germany. And when I went to graduate school, I did a year in Cairo, and then I did another year in Cairo. And now I've lived in the UK for 25 years. So, SYA was so central to my life. It was never very far away. And I was always jealous of colleagues of mine. I'm thinking of Doug Renfield Miller in particular, who joined the board and got to do SYA a lot. I just felt really jealous that he got to be a trustee. So I don't know what drove whom to ask me, but I was invited onto the board of trustees and spent 6 years there. And so it was really just fantastic to be back home, back with SYA. So I think when we decided at the meeting at the 50th anniversary to do a campaign, it felt very natural for me to want to get really seriously involved in something as momentous as this, because I just thought it was a great way to continue that engagement with SYA that I, that was part of being a trustee.
Yeah, well, you've been just a delightful colleague and helpful colleague. So thank you for all that. I should just mention to people, I know Aaron did a nice job on the history. For most of SYA's history, the board was just the 3 founding school heads. So Exeter, Andover, and St. Paul's heads. And then, I can't quite remember, maybe around 2000-ish, it expanded to have alumni on the board. And now we have 6 school heads and 12 alums on the board. And I have to say, having been on and been part of school boards, this one is the most fun because there's this synergy of the school heads knowing the day-to-day operation and the infectious enthusiasm of the alums, and we just all come together and have a great time and respect each other and have really deep conversations. So Alex, tell a little bit about how you got involved in your volunteer efforts for SYA.
I'm trying to remember. I think one of Woody's, perhaps his development director, got in touch with me. When was this? This must have been maybe almost a decade ago at this point. And, I started getting calls. I mean, I guess the development effort was underway, and I think my mom had been probably sending checks every now and then. But I was so happy to get back in touch. I mean, it had been, I think that's what it was, honestly. I was in New York, and I got a call, and I started seeing, I think Woody started coming to New York, and I started seeing him for a lunch or just a cup of coffee. And I was eventually asked to be on the Philanthropy Council. And I was happy to do that, happy to sort of make calls and ask for money. Because why wouldn't I? I mean, how could you say no to SYA? That was my thought. I mean, one of the most exciting experiences of their lives. So, I mean, it's got to be just easy calling and saying, hey, can you give some money to SYA? So I was really happy to do that. And then at some point, I was asked to be on the board. I guess they needed somebody. And that was that. I mean, and I was happy to do it. At the time, actually, one of my classmates was on the board, and I thought, ooh, this could be fun too. I'm helping SYA and also getting to catch up with my old friend Carolyn. So it was a no-brainer, really. That's good. And yeah. I was happy to be on the board for the last 6 years, just coming up now. Yeah.
And Jamie, your time on the board, you were very involved with the finance committee. And obviously there's an intersection of the finance committee with this capital campaign. And so you might want to talk about the financial health of SYA prior to the campaign and now because of the campaign. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be delightful. Thanks.
Well, I mean, the thing that was really interesting about SYA is that before the campaign started, it had an endowment of $12 or $13 million, which is really quite extraordinary for a school of this size. So the financial groundwork for School Year Abroad has been very, very strong. What's interesting is that despite the fact that we've gone through quite a trying time financially, all businesses have, all institutions have, all schools have. Despite that, because of the campaign, we're now significantly stronger than we were when we started the campaign. I mean, we've now, we started with a endowment of about $12 or $13 million. We've now added about $12 million to that. So the fact is that we've gone through a coronavirus and an economic and social crisis of unseen proportions, but we are now we're technically financially in better shape now than we've ever been. And I think the thing that, when I, coming from the asset management business and having been in banking and now being actively involved in how to move capital into organizations that really are doing fantastic things, it feels so encouraging to see the extent to which we have maintained our financial viability in particular, so that we've been able to maintain our identity, and we will use the campaign to assure our financial solidity for a very, very long time in the future. And I think most of us think of, we're setting this up for the next 50 years. And so I think one of the exciting things about the campaign is that it has made sure that this organization is financially stable and comes through a coronavirus even stronger than it's ever been. And it's allowed us to not reshape ourselves and trim ourselves excessively, but to really maintain that mission that was so important to me when I started, 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And Jamie, your comments bring two things to mind for me. One is just to remind people on the webinar that we did have to evacuate our students last spring. And as Aaron mentioned, most all of them stayed with us, and that's a real testimony to the experience they had. So they were back here in the States with their parents and online. We did incur some financial loss because of that for a number of reasons of helping kids get back on flights at the last minute, and also giving back a little bit of the tuition because they weren't not in country and living with host families. But you're right, the campaign really has set us up to weather those kinds of storms. And right now I should say to people, because of the visa situation, we were unable to send students over this fall. We are in the midst right now with the board deciding whether we can do this safely starting in January. So stay tuned for that decision, which will come in the next few weeks. And so that's really helpful. And also the timing's really interesting, which is Aaron would be the first to say, we've done a great job, but here's the last push, and it comes when Aaron and I can't get out to see people. So it makes our job a little bit of a challenge in the last, the last lap of the campaign. But we're doing these kinds of things, and we're really kind of connecting with people virtually to make those personal connections and asks for the campaign. Alec, are there any things in your, I know you've been co-chair of the campaign, anything that you'd like to mention about your observations of the campaign and how that's been going from your perspective and how you've been working with Aaron on it?
Well, I'm very impressed with Erin and her team, and I think the messaging has been right on, and that what the campaign is targeting are the most important aspects of SYA and what needs to be bolstered for the next generation of students. I am happy that it looks as if we've raised, and if I'm speaking out of turn, so tell me, but we've raised most of the money that we hope to raise for curricular innovation, and that we are focusing now on funds for financial aid, and 50% of SYA students require aid, and there are many more who would come. I mean, there are students who don't even apply because they just feel like they can't afford it. And we want more of those students. So we're hoping to raise more money for financial aid, and also more money for teacher development, and also, honestly, to ensure that we can hire the best teachers. As far as I understand it, some of our most experienced and most beloved teachers are about to retire. So we will be hiring. We will be in the market for new teachers in the next few years. So this is a really important goal. And I feel like we're doing really well with this. I mean, these are goals that I think all of our alums understand and care about. And so I feel really good about the last year of the campaign.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on two threads there. One is the curricular innovation was really taking our wonderful stuff that we do, and we historically have always made kids whole in math and English, and really given them an amazing depth of the history and the culture and the language. But the thing that we've changed is really kind of getting the kids out of their seats and into the local areas to really practice their language skills, but also understand the culture. And so that's been really exciting. And the year-end reviews have become stronger and stronger during that time to open up that kind of work. So that's been really great. And the other piece about financial aid, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think particularly given the times we're in, we want to make sure we are accessible to as many students as we can be. Some member schools send some of their financial aid money with the student, but that's becoming harder and harder as the schools, again, are hit with COVID kinds of things. And so for us to have our own strong pot of financial aid money is great. And Aaron, you might want to talk about the Alvarez Global Scholars and also his matching gift. I think that would be really helpful for people to know.
Sure, I'm happy to. I did mention in my comments at the beginning that the Alvarez family has made the largest gift in SY's history. That was $2 million to establish the Malua and Carlos Alvarez Global Scholars Fund. And what that does each year is it funds a full scholarship for 2 students, and specifically public school students who are able to go to SYA because the Alvarez families made that financial aid possible. So last year we had our first 2 Alvarez Global Scholars, Annika Milliman, and who went to France, and Frances Leibowitz, who went to Italy. Actually, we talked with Annika and her resident director, Mina Kadir, last week with some donors to the campaign. Just Annika shared about her year. We're actually going to make that available for others to listen in and hear how that went. And then next week, we will have a webinar specifically for student aid, and Frances will be part of a panel of several students speaking about her year in Italy. So if you're interested to hear more from them directly, certainly listen to the recording and tune in next week. In terms of the Alvarez multiplier match, that's the matching challenge that you're referencing. I was going to get to it at the end, but I'll happily talk about it here and maybe again later just to reinforce it. But so Carlos Alvarez was a member of our board of trustees. He was, I believe, our first parent trustee, and he's been quite generous over his tenure with SYA. His daughter Carla was a SYA France student in 2000, and he's been quite financially generous as well. And so in addition to the $2 million to establish their endowed scholarship, he has also made another $1 million available in matching funds. And this is specifically to encourage people to make stretch gifts, to make leadership gifts specifically. So gifts at the $100,000 level or more. Sounds like a lot. This is one where you got to break it into chunks, right? So 5 years, 100,000, that's 20,000 a year. For many people, that's a very big stretch gift to consider. But what happens is when you make a gift at that level, it unlocks 25% of that gift in matching funds. So if it's at $100,000, that's 25,000 that is automatically secured in matching funds. So we're encouraging in this last year specifically, people to consider making a stretch gift at the leadership level. If you can't do that, then obviously any gift that you can make will be very much appreciated as we keep striving for that 18 million. But that is a pretty special initiative that he's made possible.
Aaron, as a financial guy, can I just say the return on investment is pretty damn good with the match. Which, you know, Tom, I'd love to just make an observation on that because, you know, I'm an investment, my career has been in investment, and now I'm working on social impact investment. And social impact investment is all about achieving outcomes. It's about investing money and achieving a social or environmental outcome. That's really what we're all about. And that's the way I feel about this campaign. This campaign it's not about donating money to SYA. It's investing money in SYA for particular outcomes. And so throughout this whole process, I've never thought of this campaign as having anything to do with philanthropy or donation. It's about people investing in something that they know delivers particular outcomes, very meaningful life outcomes. And so that's the way I would love the people that we're approaching to think about this as delivering outcomes. And I think about the Senate race. There are certain outcomes that I would like to see in certain states. And so I don't donate to candidates, senatorial candidates. I invest in certain candidates because I have my mind on a particular outcome that I'm looking to generate. And that's where I invest my money in this national campaign. So to me, it's really, I'd love it if people would think about this is an institution that is delivered for 50 plus years amazing educational and life outcomes, invest in us.
Well said. Well said. And on that note, Aaron, I'm going to turn that to you to make your comments more about the campaign.
Well, I was going to take some Q&A, and the box has been light. So if you're listening in and you have a question, now's the time to ask. But I have a few that came up that I was thinking about, just to keep the conversation going for a little bit. If you'll entertain me. So we touched upon, or Jamie, you just mentioned kind of your personal beliefs and that concept of investment. And without making any kind of political statement, we'll keep that out of this. Why would you say that SYA is important now? So considering, and Alex, once Jamie's had a chance to respond, I'll ask you the same thing, but given what's happening in the world now, why is SYA important?
Well, I think, we've become a lot more global. The world has become more global. We're more interconnected than we were in 1960 and 1970. So I think it's impossible for the U.S., for students in the U.S. to really function in a world without having a greater awareness of what is out there, and having an empathy for the cultures and the countries that we're intersecting with all the time in ways that we didn't used to. So I think in that respect, it's also, it's extremely important. I would also say, though, that having grown up myself and then watching my kids grow up a generation later, it does feel as if our kids are becoming risk averse and less ready for challenge, and less ready for adventure, and less danger for risk, and less danger for less appetite for doing something new and different and challenging. And I think we need to help restore some of that in the lives of kids who've got ambition to really do something interesting with their lives. So I think that re-injecting that sense of adventure back into people's lives is more important now than it was before.
And Jamie, you mentioned the word empathy. As I talk about SYA to prospective families, I always talk about, you're going there and you'll learn the language and culture, but really what's important for an adolescent who by nature is all about him or her is to be the other and to understand and have empathy for that. And in this world, wow, that is an amazing gift a parent can give a kid, and to not only to their kid, but to the world itself. So I'm big on that empathy piece of SYA.
Yeah, so Alex, I'll ask you the same question. Kind of given everything that's happening in the world, why do you believe that SYA is important now?
Well, Tom and Jamie have made fantastic points. I'm not sure I can add all that much really, but certainly right now the US is in a place of great division, and SYA counters that. The US in many ways is less, even as the world has opened up with the internet, technology, in some ways, we are more closed off and more insular than we have been. And languages have been de-emphasized. Students are channeled into certain tracks as they vie for colleges. And this goes to what Jamie says about not risking anything. They very early on become afraid and really are thinking only about, even as early as 9th grade, they're no longer looking at new things to do. They think, this is who I am. I'm a soccer player. I'm a burgeoning scientist. They cut themselves off from experience, from just trying things, from experimenting. And SYA is the exact opposite of that. SYA just encourages you to discover who you are, who you may not even realize. You don't know who you are, it just opens yourself up. It's so freeing. And you don't know that until you get there. And there are kids out there who want that, when they hear about SYA, they realize, oh, wait a minute, this is a chance for me to really step off this terrible treadmill. And we just, SYA, if only we could double, triple the size of the program, you know, get more and more kids, because really every high schooler should do something like SYA, I think. I mean, it's just more important than ever for kids to have this kind of freeing experience where they can really discover themselves, as well as all these other incredible things like another culture, languages, everything we know that SYA offers.
Thanks, Alex. Another, so being in the advancement office, and you guys both know this well from serving on the as campaign co-chairs and on the advancement committee of the board, we're constantly thinking about ways to engage alumni, kind of ways to just get in front of people. And especially right now with everything that's going on, there's a lot of noise out there.
Mm.
So if somebody gets something in their mailbox from SYA, what would you say to them to encourage them to open that package? Or if they see an email come in their inbox, what would you say if you were looking over their shoulder, like, hey, you've got to read that? Start with Alex.
I would say there's going to be something really interesting in here. You're going to hear about a recent experience from SYA, or, you know, from Italy or France or Spain. You're going to hear about some new programs, some way that kids are engaging with their cultures in their SYA countries. It's going to be exciting. It's going to make your day. It's going to make you smile. It's going to inspire you. So open it up, put away that bill, you know, forget about that mortgage payment, open this.
I love it. Well stated, Alex. Jamie, same question for you.
I always open my mail from SYA because there's always going to be something interesting in it. But also, you know, it's, I mean, from a communication standpoint, SYA is so much more effective than it ever was. I think SYA's media, communications, the use of video, the use of drones, I just think School Year Abroad are so wonderful at communicating what that experience is and bringing it alive in a way that in 1970, it was a pig in a poke, I can tell you. But now I think you guys do a fantastic job conveying this is what the experience looks like, which is why I just think, you know, you got to open it up. You got to look at it because there's always something really cool happening at School Year Abroad.
Right. No
Well,
dull
Jamie,
moments.
I'll make sure. Yeah, I'll make sure the team hears your wonderful kudos. And also, it's a good plug to have people go to the website and kind of take a look. And here's really an encouragement, which is to share that with neighbors and who have kids who might be interested. I think our strongest is the word of mouth, and it's our current students and our alums who really kind of direct kids our way. So I'm encouraging anyone who listens to this webinar to spread the word.
Well, Tom, can I comment on that? Because I think you just made a really, really important point, which is that the vitality of School Year Abroad, some of it's about, some of the financial support comes from people investing in School Year Abroad, but it's also just as important financially for us to have a flow of students. So for alums out there who don't feel like they can really stretch and make a big effort on the financial side, honestly, if they can stretch and just give themselves, you know, challenge themselves to make a referral or find a referral, that is really, really valuable, including from a financial standpoint. I don't think alums think in those terms. They always think of a campaign in terms of coming up with money, but I think if you can come up with referrals, that also feeds right into the vitality of School Year Abroad, the financial solidity of School Year Abroad, and the future of School Year Abroad. So I think it's something that we don't talk enough about, is the value of referrals.
Thanks, Jamie. That's very important and a really good point. I'm going to make a quick plug for the campaign case statement since we're talking about materials. Some of you may have gotten that in hand at some point. If you haven't and would like one, just get in touch with us. We'll be happy to send you one, but it's also available on the campaignforsya.org. You can look at it there. Some really great stories. I don't need to sell it because Jamie and Alex just did. So listen to all that they said and then take a look at it. But I have one more question for you guys, and that is, when you first started volunteering for SYA, what surprised you? What surprised you the most when, specifically, I guess, your very first volunteer position for SYA. What was surprising? And we'll start with Alex.
Okay, that would have been the Philanthropy Council. Yeah, I'm not sure this is surprising, but I felt that the council was just made up of a group of really interesting, committed people from all different years, from every program. That point included China, and it just was really impressive group. And I guess when you go in SYA, you think mainly in terms of your own year. You're sort of very focused on your group, and you kind of think of the program as being yours. You and only your 60 people, that's what SYA is. So it was just fantastic to meet people from, all different years and all similarly committed to SYA.
For me, I remember Schoolboys Abroad. I remember the pre-history of this organization. It was run on a shoestring. It was informal. It wasn't very tight from a health and safety standpoint back in 1970. So I would say the thing that struck me the most when I re-engaged as a professional with School Year Abroad was how sophisticated and professional the organization is in terms of its management of people, management of the process, development, recruitment, financial management, health and safety, the sophistication of the curriculum. I mean, it was an entirely new world. I mean, it was still School Year Abroad, but boy, oh boy, this thing had grown up and gotten professional, and that really blew me away. And it keeps surprising me. As I say, the work that you guys do, the sophistication of the work, the sophistication of the thinking around curriculum and communication. It's not your grandfather's Schoolboy Abroad.
That's right.
Thanks, Jamie. Tom, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about health and safety specifically and how that's come along, especially within the last few years.
Yeah, no, clearly what's interesting is people who've been on school boards know that there's this committee called the Audit Committee. And for years and years and years, that committee really looked at the financial books to make sure that things were going well and the financial health. That committee has taken on another critical piece, which is to oversee our health and safety and making sure we're top of the game in that. And you can imagine that in an overseas program, that takes on an even deeper and more important role. And so we put a lot of resources into looking at our health and safety protocols. And in fact, I mentioned we're looking at whether we can open in January. And really, the key question is, can we be as safe an environment for kids as humanly possible? That's a huge question for us as we're working our way through that. So again, the health and safety issue, always top foremost in our minds, but it's even kind of taken to the next level these days.
Tom, I saw Jamie mouthing something. You're on mute, Jamie, but I'll assume it was an agreement.
No, I meant to be on mute. I thought you could tell from just from my lips moving that I agreed with Tom. I mean, absolutely. We're light years ahead of where we were. The rigor that we apply to health and safety is just so impressive. And I come from a bank, so.
Very important. All right, so with that, I've just been monitoring the chat and the Q&A. It doesn't look like anything else has come in. So I'm just gonna make a few closing comments and calls to action. But before I do that, I wanna say a huge thank you again to Jamie and Alex for being our amazing campaign co-chairs. We wouldn't be where we are without you. And you have just been incredible leaders for SYA. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So as we close today's webinar, I want to ask for your help in a number of ways, some of which have already been stated, but just going to restate them all here to have them all together. So one is that we always ask our community to help us spread the word about SYA. So Tom talked about that word of mouth, sharing with a neighbor, posting on a church board, whatever it may be. This year is no exception. So our recruiting model has obviously needed to change. While we traditionally have our admissions folks going into schools across the country with the circumstances surrounding the pandemic, a lot of that will happen virtually this year. A little bit different, not quite the same as the in-person interactions. So any doors that you can open, students that you can connect us with, we would really, really appreciate that. It would be very helpful just in getting our pool of applicants and building that out. And as Jamie mentioned, referring as many people as possible. If they don't end up coming, that's okay, but we need to generate the interest. So please help us with that. It makes, we really need to.
Aaron?
Go ahead, Alex.
Aaron, you might want to mention anyone who might. Oh no, just wanted to say,
Go ahead.
I don't know if you're still asking people to refer schools as well, though. I would imagine SYA is still interested in connecting to potential member schools. I mean, that's a whole other thing, but if anyone thinks that their kid's school could be interested in having this connection to SYA, that would be great too.
Yeah, so I see Tom nodding. We have for those that don't know, we started with the 3, Phillips Exeter Academy, Phillips Academy in Andover, and then St. Paul's as our 3 kind of founding schools. But since then, we've now built out a consortium of over 40 member schools, and they enter into a certain agreement with us in terms of sending students and allowing us to promote SYA there. Tom could probably talk a little bit more about the member school, a way to open a door with those. And I'm thinking about the Carolyn Milstein example, Tom.
Yeah, no, in fact, one of our trustees had children at Georgetown Day School in DC and ended up, kind of promoting it. And now that is a member school. And so it was an SYA alum who really kind of got them to think about it, and they fully embraced it, and they're sending us students. So if people do know of any of that, please get in touch with me directly. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder about that, Alex. That was really helpful. So the next step, if you've already made a gift or pledge to the campaign for SYA, then we ask you to talk about it with your classmates, with your friends, with other parents, with anybody that may be interested in investing in the future of SYA, investing in outcomes, as Jamie was saying. Tom and I were on the road quite a bit last year to put the campaign in front of people, but the voices of you, the people in the community who have already committed, that's way more powerful than anything that Tom and I could say. So please just help us in convincing others to join in and to make an investment. And if you haven't done so yet, please be open to talking more about that in the coming months and considering a stretch gift as we begin scheduling some virtual meetings with people like you who care really deeply about SYA and want to strengthen it for the future. If you'd like to talk with us, if we haven't reached out to you, please reach out to us. You can go on campaignforsya.org and find our contact info. My email personally is eerickson@sya.org. Feel free to write to me. I'd be happy to hear from you. And then lastly, please keep reading our emails. So I asked that question for a reason earlier, and it's that we know there's a lot of noise out there, but we have a really good message to share. And we have a lot of these great events that we've been hosting virtually. So we had 2 events during Founders Week that I just want to highlight because the recordings are now up and being shared. So the first was a panel with 4 of the first female students of SYA. And that was, I could have listened for hours, and it's an hour long, so take a little bit of time if you have some time in the car or whatnot, put it on then, but really interesting to hear about that early experience from some of the first women and what they've gone on to do since. And then on September 16th, we had a panel with our 3 RDs in Europe, and that was, they talked more about what's happening in each country and how the SYA experience continues to evolve and change, and especially with some of these recent curricular changes. So I encourage you to tune in, get to know them a little bit better by watching that recording. I think we had a prospective family on there that was like, oh, wow, like these people are great. I'd be happy to send my kids into their care. So if you need a resource to send to some other families, you've got one in that. And then these next 3 weeks will be all about the campaign. So next week will be about student aid. We'll have a panel of financial aid students who will speak about their experience. The week after that will be curricular innovation, and our resident director in Italy, Pat Scanlon, will have a few students join him to talk about the evolution of the curriculum there. That's actually where we piloted some of these changes that have now been spread over the other SYA countries. And then that final week will be faculty support. So we'll have Tomas from Spain and Lene from France talking about their experience as faculty and some professional development. So look forward to seeing you for some of those. And thank you again for attending today and for your deep commitment to SYA's mission. And I hope to see you all again soon.